Thank you, John. You didn't say that the volunteer for Wednesday is a vacancy, so if anyone would like to volunteer, I gather it's vacant, and you can see you'll get a plaque in 10 years' time when you retire. Now, I'm rather nervous here because I've only been doing this job for a few months and it's always been blokes I've introduced, and I'm a bit nervous around women. So I hope I get through this all right. But our guest speaker is Asha, and she's currently a professor and associate dean. That sort of thing impresses me. We were talking about my heart operation earlier, and it was a professor that operated on me, and I'm still here. So they must do a pretty good job. But she's a professor and associate dean of mathematical sciences within the School of Science at RMIT University. I did my apprenticeship at RMIT, but it wasn't a university, but I might add that to my CV when I'm looking for a job. She is an Australian 2019-20 superstar of STEM. I hope you'll tell us what STEM is. An algebraist by training, my godfather. She has applied algebraic techniques to communications, resulting in highly ranked publications. The impact of her research in risk, which addresses issues such as fraud and money laundering, now I'm into it, has resulted in an invitation to participate in national and international bodies. And tonight she's come to talk to you. Welcome, Asha.
Hello. Yes, so thank you, Peter. Yes, what is STEM? That's science, engineering, actually science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So I'm the M in STEM. So there are 60 of us this year who have been chosen. At the end of last year, we were chosen to represent the different parts of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to basically show younger generations that women are in STEM. They are in these professions.
What does it stand for?
Engineering. So science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So just in case you all are wondering, what is a mathematician? And I am a mathematician. What is a mathematician doing in fighting cybercrime? About almost 20 years ago now at RMIT in the School of Mathematics, it was the Department of Mathematics then, we started the Master of Information Security, which is now called cybersecurity. So part of that, in about 2003, so about 4 years later, the industry wanted us to change, adapt the degree. So at that time, we had to introduce risk management, and I was the person who was driving this. And the business faculty at RMIT did not have anything in risk management, so I trained myself up. I sat on the Standards Australia Committee for Information Security Management Systems, for risk management. I did a 6 weeks placement on a global project with EY as a senior consultant, but came back to university. I needed to do maths. So I'll tell you a bit of how I got to do this stuff. So I'm just basically going to talk about the United Nations has started, back in 2010, the United Nations General Assembly asked the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes, that is the UNODC, to bring together an intergovernmental group to talk about cybercrime. So, and I was invited to these. So, and I'll tell you how a mathematician got invited to these. And I've attended only one of them. I've been invited 4 times, but it is in Vienna, and it is in semester 1 when I teach. So I can only go every so often. So I've gone once. I didn't go for the 2019 one. But anyway, more of that as I go along. So very brief. This is going to be, I'm going to give you a little bit more of an introduction of what I mean, what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the cybercrime laws, and I will talk about the intergovernmental meetings, what is happening in some detail. And as Peter said, he prefers the questions to come at the end. So remember your questions. So The important thing when you look at cybercrime is, or rather just the cyberspace, or just crime in general, so there are two sides. So one side is security and the other side is crime. So you have something which is trying to block it and you have something which is trying to attack it all the time. So now what has happened is over these last maybe 20, 25 years, there has been the internet has become really high speed. So, I'm in that generation which remembers what I call the strangled cat modem. So yes, so we no longer have strangled cat modems. And we have, very highly connected networks, very complex applications. Like this morning, I had a phishing email sitting in my inbox. I looked at it and I knew it was a phishing email. And many companies now actually run social engineering exercises where they try and trip you into clicking a phishing email. I didn't know. I'm a cybersecurity specialist. I'm a cybersecurity expert. I'm incredibly paranoid. So I forwarded that to the cybersecurity team at RMIT and said, deal with this. So not my problem. So that other part is that you have petabytes of data now being generated. So you say petabytes. You remember Google, the original word for Google was actually goggle, which means 10 with 23 zeros or something like that. Don't quote me, I'm not sure. But yes, so that much of data. So you have a huge amount of data being generated. You have the ability, for example, if you look at it, you have Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. So this is what happened last year, is that Facebook is collecting data, and then they sold it to Cambridge Analytica. Maybe they didn't sell it directly, but they did something which allowed then Cambridge Analytica to use information which they then say, allegedly, I guess, or maybe it's proved, and I don't know if it's in court yet, or it has gone through the courts, that it caused some of the problems with the Brexit, with the Trump elections, and maybe even the Australian, not sure. So the only thing is, yes, so we are trying to secure these networks, and then you have the other side of the coin. You have all these criminals who are threatening security, who want to break in. In the past, it used to be just money, but now the biggest thing each of you owns is your identity. And if you lose that identity, it is very, very hard to prove that you are who you say you are. So just imagine having to go to the bank and say, for example, Peter, say, I am Peter, and he will say, I don't believe you. According to this, Peter is 25 years old, owns a Maserati. How do you prove? It could be his son, but it could also be, and Peter is like, I wish I had that Maserati. So the problem is the laws that we have. So if you have been watching TV, you have law and order. So it is not only the police, you have the law which actually prosecutes the criminals. So one of the things that is lacking with regards to cyber crime, criminals who are using the computer, using the internet, is that the laws are continuously catching up. They're not there yet. And so it's just like, there are almost all companies now have cybersecurity teams. So those teams are continuously trying to think like the criminals and trying to work out how do we secure the computer. It's like that phishing attack. So when you think everything is secure, you have then something else which comes in, what we call out of the, if you're looking at a soccer analogy, past the, what's that? I can't remember what it is called now. Where the person goes left field or something like that, yeah. Offside, thank you, Peter. Yes, so it's the offside, yeah, and that's what happens with security and trying to protect. That's good. That was really good. So one of the things that is there for securing networks, so one side is that, remember, the law and order side. So the order side is you have people actually doing things. So the security standards, for example, the 27000 series, which look at information security management. How do you manage information security? What do you do? What should you be doing? How can you make it more secure? And remember, nothing is ever 100% secure. So at the same time, there is continuously new laws to prevent cybercrime. And something that a number of people who are working in the cybersecurity field are quite upset is the current laws that went in around late December last year, where they are trying to get a backdoor. So for example, WhatsApp, when you use WhatsApp, it's end-to-end encryption. And the belief of the people who are using it is that nobody can actually break that encryption. They need to get my phone or the phone of the person, and only then they can see what it is. They can't. So what the government is trying to do is to put in a backdoor. They're saying, oh no, you should be able to unencrypt it. And all the cryptologists and the cryptographers are saying, no, that will then unsecure everything. So yes, to catch one criminal, do we put all of us at risk, which is a problem. So the government then has to think about how do I. So this was the one that we're looking at from June 2018, so this was the start of the law that finally got passed in December. And it was that the tech giants, for example, Tesla, Optus, Google, Facebook, would all have to you would have to be able to unencrypt any data that was encrypted. And so then you had Angus Taylor on top saying, okay, no, we need to do this. You need to be able to give me the data. And there are many cases, for example, Apple, which has refused. WhatsApp, which happens to be a subsidiary of Facebook, has also refused, saying, no, we are not going to do that. We cannot do it. And the government says, yes, you can. And the cryptographers are, no, you can't. So and so on and so forth goes the argument. So let's look at why do we need cybercrime laws. And if you talk to the young cybersecurity experts, they love their gizmos. They love everything bright, new, and shiny. They want to spend as much money as they can. But the important thing with security is so strange. It's like a car. If you take a car and you want to make it really secure, then you have to build it like a tank, and it has to go at 5 kilometers an hour. Not that Maserati, Peter, sorry. So that is not considered to be fully secure. So which of us wants to drive in a tank which goes at 5 kilometers an hour? I would have never got here because I had to come from the other side of the city. So that's the thing, is we are prepared to give up a little bit, so and say, okay, how secure can we get? So the modern cars have things like airbags, they have side airbags, they have things like braking control, they have electronic stability control. So they have a lot, and it is getting better. It's getting better. But the important thing to remember is that cars are still inherently dangerous, both to the occupants and the passengers. And we know that. Every time we get into a car, we know that this is the same. And that's the same with computers. So why, for example, technology? So people then think, okay, we can get better technology, but technology cannot actually prevent crime. So what can technology do? It can make it easier for the criminal to get away. So when the wheel was invented, it didn't stop crime, it helped the criminal get away. So the question is, so for example, why does mail not get opened? You know, mail gets put into your mailbox and nobody opens it. And that's because there are laws which says it is a criminal offense to open mail that is not addressed to you. And that is what is needed at the cybercrime side. But there's a problem. Because it's harder to, a mail, when you get it, it's something you can handle, something you can see, and you can say, okay, this is what it holds. But when you look at the cyber side of things, it's not certain. What cannot be opened? You know, a very good example is when you have, for example, an affidavit, you sign on the paper, right? But when you do a digital signature, by the very nature of the digital signature is not on the document. It is not part of the document, because if you put it as part of the document has changed. So those are the sort of questions you're trying to answer when you're looking at cybercrime. So to give you a little bit about my involvement, and then I'll do a little bit, so I'll be going in and out over here. So my involvement is in March 2012, as I said, the General Assembly, and I'll go back to it, the General Assembly asked the UNODC to start an intergovernmental meeting. And in March 2012, the UNODC, that's the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which is situated in Vienna, they launched the global UN study on cybercrime, and they requested government bodies, private organizations, but also universities. And I was approached by the UNODC to fill this survey. And I wondered why I had been. As you say, people don't realize at RMIT, the cybersecurity is one of RMIT's best kept secrets. We have been running for 20 years, but I still have people at RMIT ring me and say, how come you're involved with cybersecurity? You know, it's like 20 years I've been doing this, and you still ask me, what am I doing here? And that's the thing, is for me, at that time in 2012, I was like, oh wow, they found me. How did they find me? And then I realized that in 2010, I had actually published a paper on money laundering, on how can small and medium enterprises protect themselves, can be compliant to the Anti-Money Laundering Counter-Terrorism Financing Act of Australia, which was passed in around 2006. So I'd published a paper, and I think at some point it got to that, the body saw it, and I was asked, and I did fill it in. I got help from the CISO, that is the Chief Information Security Officer at the time, Greg Bristow, and Craig Stoll, the RMIT Director for Internal Audit and Risk Management. It was just around the time that RMIT actually had a CISO and a risk management department. It was just a couple of years before. So I filled that in, and then let me tell you a little bit more about the Intergovernmental Meeting. What does it mean? It was a resolution, as I said, in 2010 by the General Assembly of the United Nations, and it requested the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice to establish an open-ended intergovernmental expert group, and basically to conduct a comprehensive study of the problem and to work out what are the responses to it by member states, by the international community, the private sector. So the international community includes universities. So RMIT became a part of this. And I have in my bag, wait, let me go to the next one. All right, so the part of this, it was established in 2010, and it followed the Salvador Declaration. So many of these declarations by the United Nations, or agreements or conventions, are named after the city that they were signed in. So the Salvador one was signed in El Salvador, and it is a comprehensive strategies for global challenges, and this is what it said. It basically was looking at what is cybercrime, and they're still debating it. They had another meeting early this year. They're debating that. What is the statistical information you can get? And this changes every year. And finally, what are the challenges? And as I said, one of the major challenges is the fact that trying to take laws which have traditionally for thousands of years been physical laws. So you cannot steal your neighbor's goat, for example. But how do you then convert it? You cannot steal your neighbor's cyber goat. Yeah, so a bit hard. How do you define that cyber goat? So in the first meeting, which was from the 17th to the 21st of January 2011, they deliberated on two different things: substantive, which was what was the problem, what is the legislation that is there, what is best practice, what is the technical assistance that can be provided by, for example, how do you get the technical assistance? How can member states, for example, the Australian government, get that assistance? And what is the perspectives? So one of the things that you learn in risk management is that it's not just what is done, it is what is the different perspectives. Who sees it in which way? I can see it differently, you can see it differently. How do you bring that together? How do you then bring a law that is acceptable? Acceptable. I'm not saying everybody's going to like it. Most people are not going to like it, but it's acceptable. Okay. So, and the focus was to strengthen the existing laws. If there are, propose new ones, new ways of doing things, new way of learning about it. Okay, and part of that survey that I filled is in this one. It's called the Comprehensive Study on Cybercrime, draft February 2013. It still says draft. I picked this up last year. It still says draft. 2018. But okay, so let's look a little bit of the history. So to try and understand how this thing fits in. Okay, so in 1960s, you first had transistor-based computer systems. And physical damage to systems or data was considered a crime. So that was the first thing. So if you had a computer, somebody came and whacked it with a baseball bat, just as they could whack your windscreen with a baseball bat, that was considered a crime. Okay. And then in the 1970s, there was illegal use of computer systems and manipulation of computer electronic data. So if you could change things around, and this was like when people, I think some of the first cases of hacking and all started. So that is very similar. It's the illegal use of computer systems and manipulation of electronic data. So if you can take something like an affidavit and you can change things in it, then that is illegal change of using computer to change something, or somebody gets into the data about property or property lines and changes that. No, that became illegal. But you can still see it was very much to do with the physical side. Very little movement coming across. Then later, at that time, the shift from the manual to computer-operated transactions came in the 70s. You started then seeing computer-related fraud. Okay. In the 80s, personal computers started becoming popular, and I think in Australia it was more like the 90s that they became popular. Then you had software piracy, which is still there, and crime related to patents. They started to appear. And then in the 1990s, the World Wide Web was introduced. There was rapid growth in internet users and of new things like child pornography, sharing of these things, all of that then started becoming crimes. Okay. So let's look at the first decade of the 21st century. The first thing is computer crimes, as opposed to internet crimes, are generally local crimes. So you had to get access to that computer, you could come and whack it or whatever, but you had to be here. I couldn't do it from Russia, for example. All right, so the internet basically changed this. It made electronic crime, which was local, into transnational. So somebody in South Sudan could send you an email saying that you had won, $1 gazillion. Yeah, somebody had died and left you a huge amount of money. And so then you started that social engineering. People want something for nothing. So in the 2000s, which is the first decade, very sophisticated methods emerged. So you had phishing, you had botnet attacks. So all they needed to get into one computer, and then from there they could get into a huge number of computers, and then they could do mass, large-scale fraud and identity theft. So there was also emerging technologies like voice over IP and cloud computing. Further difficulties, how do you do law enforcement if somebody is not here? how do you get, and if you look at some of the early documentaries, you know, and so it was really good because this was the time when the cybersecurity programs were happening at RMIT, and some of the things we did was trying to introduce the students to what was there, and so we would in class look at documentaries about how the first hacker was caught, who was the hacker, and I think the story of the first hacker is in this book called The Cuckoo's Egg. It's a beautiful book about how the first hacker was caught, how he actually got into. So if you look at some of the things that have happened, for example, the Tor, have you all heard of the Tor network, the Onion network? That was actually started by the US Navy, because they wanted to actually do certain things, they wanted to go under and they wanted to check stuff. So much of it, for example, the internet came from ARPANET, where it was just a whole bunch of academics who wanted to exchange information. It was funded by the US Defense, but it was started by academics. And so there was no security built in. Because it was like, who wants to know what I'm doing? Really, it's like the UNODC finding me. It's like, yeah, that sort of a thing. Okay, so what was the important takeaway from the first intergovernmental meeting was that cybercrime is not a problem that mainly affects developed countries. It actually affects developing countries even more, because since 2005, the number of internet users in developing countries has been continuously larger. So that is when they reached and surpassed the number of internet users in, for example, in any of the developed countries. So there are more internet users. So what is the flip side of that? There are more internet users in developing countries, which means there is also more crime coming out of there. So we need to be able to get developing countries to look at cybercrime laws, to have cybercrime laws. Because if they don't have cybercrime laws, those people are attacking us. We can't do anything about it. Like, for example, all the Nigerian scams. You know, we can't do anything about it because they are in Nigeria. They may not be. For all we know, they are in, you know, Murul Bark or somewhere. But yeah, they could be. They could be. That's the problem. You can't tell. You can't tell. So it is important to fight cybercrime in developing countries. And the difference between the two, the impacts are different. So in developing countries, more spam and internet abuse. So they get huge amount of spam. We tend to now, because of the developed countries, we have enough infrastructure to be able to stop spam. So spam never reaches your inbox. It's already stopped by whichever mail provider you are using. But that's not the case in say, for example, India. There's a huge amount of spam. Everybody's spamming you all the time. And they think that's, and then you have people believing everything that has been spammed. And I get cousins telling me, oh, you know, that's true. It's like, no, it's not. Have you done a little bit of an internet search? That'll tell you it's wrong. Okay, so the action item was the study. I'm sorry, things seem to be. Yep. So was the study that was then published. So there was a questionnaire, it collected and analyzed data, was sent to member states, to intergovernmental organizations, to private sector, to universities, and we were all invited. So there's about 4 or 5 universities across the world which seem to have filled this. And I think, see, it went to particular people, so it means that that person had to want to do it. It was quite hard trying to get the people at RMIT. It's only reason I was able to do it because I already had a working relationship with the Chief Information Security Officer and the head of audit at RMIT. That's the only reason I was able to do it. Because I remember sending it to them, nothing happened. Then after about 3 weeks or so, I sat down and I tried to answer these, and I rang them and I said, can you give me answers to these? How do I do it? Can I come and sit with you? So that's sort of that it needed that much of effort on my part to actually do this thing. And so it was, so the idea was that, so this was January that the meeting was held. By July, they would have the survey. The questionnaire would be finished. The survey would be conducted in 2011, and you would have the second meeting in early December 2011. No, that didn't happen. It took 2 years. It was early 2013. So the first meeting was in January 2011. The next meeting was in actually, I think, February 2013. So this is what happened in late December. Actually, I think it was Boxing Day. I was in India visiting my parents when I got this email. And it said, "Dear RMIT." It didn't say "Dear Asha." It said, "Dear RMIT, please pass this attached letter on." I don't expect to get an email from the UNODC. It's like, what? Okay, whatever. They want me to pass information around. I'm on holiday, not doing anything. And anyway, it was Boxing Day. RMIT is closed till the 2nd of January. I was not even in Australia. I was not in Melbourne. What was I going to do? I closed it. Didn't look at it at all. Till about, I think, 7 months later, when I was looking for something, this comes up. And I'm like, oh my God, I was invited to the United Nations and I didn't pay any attention. It was really, really sad. So I sent off an email to that thing saying, you know what? Because it was over. The second meeting was over. I was like, okay, can you please invite me next time? And I didn't expect anything to happen, I just thought, yeah, I have to respond just because they have sent me an invite. So what did happen is that it is on the website of the United Nations, the UNODC website. So there was the comprehensive study, the chair, so the second meeting was in early 2013. The chair was from South Africa, and you had 87 member states and 1 non-member observer state. So things like the European Union by itself is not a member state. So you have the European Union and the Council of Europe both turn up to these meetings, but they can only observe. As an observer, you can give your opinion, but you are not included in the voting. So this is what happened, and this. Okay, so what happened next? So in 2015 and 2016, the draft study was that's the draft study, was translated into 6 official languages, sent all over the world. At this point, I had no clue any of this was happening. I was just sitting there and I thought I had refused an invitation from the UNODC. Nobody wants to know me anymore. Anyway, I just continued with my life, being an academic, a researcher, everything. And so comments were received from 23 states, including the European Union. There were some comments from the Council of Europe, which basically talked about the cybersecurity. They had a cybersecurity strategy already. So that's one thing about the European Union, is that they seem to be way ahead. So right now, almost all companies have to abide by what are called the GDPR, which has to do with privacy, new regulations for privacy. And even Australia, even though we are not part of the European Union, many of the companies have to tell us when they put us on a mailing list, and they have to take us off that mailing list. There's a whole bunch of criteria that they have to satisfy. So they are way ahead of the game. So they wanted an open, safe, and secure cyberspace. They wanted it to be strong on human rights, which is wonderful. That's where you go when you're looking for privacy. You look at what the European Union is doing. You want to look at human rights. You look at what the European Union is doing. Some of the member states may not be listening to them, but this is as a collective. That is what they're doing. So it supports the development of secure and resilient technologies collaboratively between the public sector and academia, and that is what the Council of Europe was doing. And what did the Council of Europe have? It had the Budapest Convention. So it was a convention on cybercrime, which was signed in Budapest, Hungary. So it just has since then been called the Budapest Convention. Okay, all right, so it was the first international treaty on crimes which were committed through the internet. That's the first international treaty. Remember, this is with the European states, the states in the European Union. It was by the Council of Europe, not necessarily the European Union. And it deals with infringements. So the main things are infringements of copyright, computer-related fraud, child pornography, and violations of network security. So getting into your computer is a violation of network security. So it contains details of powers and procedures such as search and interception. So the question is, can you actually intercept? So that if you remember what I said earlier, that the government wants to decrease the encryption, the end-to-end encryption that is there in WhatsApp, that is there on your iPhone. They want to break that. And what the European Union talks is of interception. When can you break it? Can you actually break it? What the European Union and the Council of Europe says at every point is that human rights first. So they keep in mind the human rights rather than catching crime. Catching crime is important, but not at the expense of human rights. So just because they want to catch criminals doesn't mean every single one of us has no security at all, no privacy at all. And that is not what the European Union wants. Okay, so the third meeting was 10th to 13th April 2017, and I got the invitation for that. I was quite surprised. Oh, they'd not forgotten me. Wow, wonderful. Yes, but unfortunately, I was in India. I was looking after my mother who was dying, so I couldn't go. Unfortunate. So I was like, second time I'm called and I can't go. But that's life. So they looked at existing legal instruments such as the Budapest Convention. They said, how can you use the Budapest Convention to actually have national legislation in each of the different member states, as they are called? And basically, because you're not, say for example, Australia is not a part of the European Union, so they can't actually sign it. What they can do is they can do an accession to that Budapest Convention, which means they can say, okay, we are going to follow all the terms, the policies, whatever, in the Budapest Convention. So it's not the same as signing on. So it's a slightly different. Others basically, and this is what I heard when I did go in 2018, was that it's a regional. It's got to do with Europe. I mean, it doesn't make sense for us to do it. So that was so when I say others, I basically do mean the other member states. So some conclusions of the third meeting. Now remember, I was not at this meeting. The threat of cybercrime continues to grow. Cybercrime is linked to transnational organized crime. So this is by then. So the third meeting was 2017. By that time, there was really big syndicates. There were things which, big, there's a huge black market, which was attacking, big corporations trying to get hold of big data. So that is what was happening, just before the Cambridge Analytica and things like that. So there is also terrorism and radicalization is happening through the internet. National legal frameworks and the capability to ensure, to enforce the laws. So it's no point in Australia, no, I shouldn't say it like that. Australia by itself enforcing laws is not enough. Not that there's no point. There is every point, but it is not enough. If we enforce laws here and those laws are not enforced in our neighboring countries or in any other country in the world, we cannot be totally secure because we cannot prosecute would be good, but no, prosecute. Yes, so we cannot, the long arm of the law, but the long arm of the law cannot reach into another country. Okay, unless there are bilateral agreements. So the whole idea here is to get that into one. So everybody makes the same thing a crime. Okay. So I went to the fourth meeting. So I got invited again. Thank you. This is where it is, the Vienna International Center, 3rd to 5th April 2018. Yes, I was invited again. So it was a little bit later they were coming. And the university funded me to go to this. So that's those are all the flags. It feels beautiful to be there. It feels sort of, you're looking at the best of human nature, what we can do, which is beautiful. So there it is. Here's the Here's the Boardroom D. So the building C is actually the conference building, and that's the Boardroom D. And I was just sitting over here. So that's Teams. I was sitting over here. That's not my coffee cup, somebody else's coffee cup. But yes, so all the nations were there. You could see the, what we would call in Australia, the argy-bargy going on. There was a lot of argy-bargy, a lot. And it was, if you have been in a meeting and you thought, oh God, this is running long, let me tell you what happened on the last day. The chair was telling everybody. I was an observer. I was telling everybody we will lose translation because there are translation services. We will lose translation at 5 o'clock. We have to get this done. We had to approve. I shouldn't say we. They. Because I didn't have to approve anything. The member nations had to agree on each paragraph of what had been discussed over the 4 days, and 2 hours they were stuck on one paragraph of 4 lines. 2 hours. Right at the beginning, telling you, I was an observer, and they do ask, the chair does turn around and ask, and I was told right at the beginning, if you want to say something, you are sort of not in the line of sight of the chair, so just let us know, and we will let him know that you want to say something. And the person who was with CYMRU from the US basically said, don't say anything. There are other countries here, Russia, China, etc. Don't say anything. So I said, okay. Not saying anything, just sat there. So now, if you're streaming this live, you're going to put it on a website. Now they know my opinion. Oh dear. Okay, so here's my observations from day 1. Okay, got 15 minutes. It was very interesting to see the Chinese panelists suggest that cybercrime and cybersecurity be addressed at the same time. So these are my observations. So this is what the Chinese panelists said. That cybersecurity and cybercrime be addressed at the same time. And that is difficult because cybersecurity is often run by private organizations. So it's the research that's happening in academia, outside as well, the tweaks that are continuously happening. You can't do cybercrime, can't happen that fast. You have to work out what is a crime before it becomes a crime. And then you have legislation. And you know from our own government how long it takes them to pass one law. It is a good thing. It is a good thing. Okay. So 71 nations at that time had signed up to the Budapest Convention. There was also what is called the GLASSY project, which is basically global action, so global action on cybercrime, which is also run by the Council of Europe and the European Union. And it was to help nations which were not in the European Union to adopt or ascend the Budapest Convention. So they would sit with you, they would try and work with you. How can you, does this work for you? How can you get it on board? How can you write the right laws to outlaw cybercrime? Okay, so the aims were to support the worldwide convention, and so the GLASSY project, and that's what was then called GLASSY Plus, were both there to implement the Budapest Convention. There is what is called an addition to the GLASSY project, which is what Australia is using to help get these cybercrime laws in all their neighboring, so the Asia-Pacific region, Indonesia, Malaysia, Samoa, all of those, Fiji, everything. Okay, so my observations of day 2, there were, I think, 3 days, 4 days. Yep. So day 2, laws needed to address crimes that cannot be addressed by common law. So that was the question. So theft of data can be addressed because the common laws, so this is what we have in Australia, came from the United Kingdom to us, from UK. Okay, common law. What is theft? We all understand. There is no, like in India, there is actually an Indian penal code which has got reams of stuff saying this and this and this and this and this. But as in the United Kingdom, similarly in Australia, there is no exact penal code. There is common law. So you understand what is theft. You understand what is stealing. You understand what is fraud, from a physical point of view, from before computers, as I call it, BC. Okay, So the theft of a database is incorporeal. You can actually, there are laws for that, for corporeal theft and incorporeal theft. There is. So its example is avoid creating legislation on typology. So don't say phishing is a crime. You know, stealing data in this particular way is a crime. Hacking into your computer is a crime. That just makes it, then there are always exceptions. So try and get the broadest brush strokes. You know, try and get to what we meant when we had that common law, or when we have that common law. The common law is still there, okay? But, you know, so where you can apply common law to cybercrime, do it. Don't reinvent the wheel, basically. So in Canada, for example, cyberbullying is a crime against privacy. See, harassment, defamation, all of that, not really in the common law as such, but crime against privacy. There is a crime against privacy. So that is the whole thing. How do you, so for example, do not criminalize phishing. Criminalize the actual activity. So what is the actual activity? Is getting into your computer. It's like somebody coming and knocking on your door, and when you open the door, getting in. That's a crime. Okay, so similarly, don't focus on, so this was just my observations, remember, this isn't what was done. This was me sitting there, just an observer, and madly typing up notes. There were a few other people there. Most of the countries, it was funny, they were not there. They were there because their government had sent them to say something, so they would say something and then they would leave. And I was sitting there, I wasn't going to say anything, but I did take a lot of notes. I had, you know, first I was writing down, and I thought, then I have to actually transcribe it into my computer. So I just started opening my computer and writing notes as I went about what I thought about all of these. Because I'm in education. So the whole idea there, so what are those intergovernmental meetings? They are about what is called capacity building. So capacity building basically is, how do we educate? How do we educate about what is a crime, about how do you get the laws? Because people don't understand computers. They don't understand criminal behavior. So for example, in Russia, existing laws and fraud were not able to cover all types of cyber fraud. There are 6 categories of fraud. And this reminds me of something that I am doing when I'm marking, that we are required to have rubrics. So everything has to be written down. The students need to know exactly how we are going to mark them. And I'm sitting there with the rubrics that I've given the students, which I'm 99.9% sure the students have not read, but that's not the thing. But I'm sitting there and I'm trying to mark, and it's like, doesn't fit in. Doesn't fit in. So I've been making notes to myself saying, change this next time around, change this next time around. And that's, you can't have cyber laws like that. You can't have rubrics saying that if you have done a crime in this exact little way, then we are going to punish you. So people are going to find ways of doing crime which are not in that exact way. They're going to find loopholes. And that is what the Budapest Convention, and Portugal was the country was really about it. Okay, they were really on board, and they said, we can do it. Yeah, it was wonderful to watch. And then I thought, never am I ever again going to complain about a committee going long. I've seen it. Okay, so China is continuously adjusting laws to deal with ICT crime. It has a law, it doesn't work, let's change it. Has a law, doesn't work. We don't want to do that, especially in Australia. We're never going to have any law at all. It's going to take 4 years by the time everything is changed. And so we have to start again. Okay. So South Africa said it's necessary for laws to be technology neutral to ensure longevity. Makes sense, right? Has to be technology neutral. Canada said you need to consider preparatory offenses, acts that could lead to crimes. For example, what happened, I think, this morning or yesterday morning, where a few people were arrested in Sydney for links to ISIS. Okay, Islamic State. All right. In China, ISPs can be held accountable, and ISP can be held accountable if it does not prevent computer criminal activity. Just imagine if we put that here. You would have no ISPs at all. You know, so you can see, you know, what would work. So what are my conclusions? Basically, the Budapest Convention is seen by more and more nations as the right framework to legislate against cybercrime. All right? The Budapest Convention is labeled as regional framework. But when you're looking at transnational crime, what is regional? What is neighbor? Makes no sense at all. Again, these are my conclusions. Many nations are trying to define or present their understanding of capacity building. How do you build capacity? How do you get nations and people and lawmakers to understand what is cybercrime? How do you understand that? And what I like is, because I've been teaching risk now for about since 2006, it's about 13 years. I like what is said in the ISO 31000, which is the international standard for risk management. It says it is important that the people who have to work with the risk understand the risk. And that is what I believe is capacity building. To get the people who work with the risk, which is the police, the crime squad, people who have to pick up the pieces, for example, social security, all of those, they need to understand the risk, because only then they will be able to work with the risk. So, thank you. That's Schönbrunn Castle so I arrived a day before, it was very cold, 1 degree, and I had time to go and see the Schönbrunn Castle, just beautiful.
Any questions?
I think we have one. Is it switched on? I think there's somebody there. Yes.
Well, thank you, Ra. Well, I have a few questions, but I'll ask the more recent ones. MyGov, the Australian government all-in website. It's rather frightening, because I can log into to MyGov to access my health insurance.
Yep.
But now I can access my tax details and all the peripheries that go into the tax, like your income, and employees like you won't get a earning statement from RMIT. You have to go into MyGov and access it from there. Your superannuation, interest, dividend, a bloody lot. Now, if that is hacked, there'll be disaster. And my concern is I'd rather have it in separate areas than one big monopoly. Your views?
I totally agree. So at some point while I was overseas, I came back and I noticed that they had done electronic records and signed everybody up to it. I was like, what happened? Was I under a rock and I didn't see this? Why have been signed up for that? And I just said to my, all my team, not only at RMIT, the whole bunch of cybersecurity researchers around, saying, what happened? Was I under a rock? And they said, no, it has been very, very quiet. So the first thing I did was went and said, nope, don't want to be part of that. So the thing about the MyGov is, yes, it is, I think about, how many years ago? About 10, 15 years ago, they tried to do a card, I think. They were going to have an Australia card, and everybody said, nah. So it's almost like this is by stealth. We are now going towards. We haven't got the card. Oh, thank God for that. It may not be long though. So the MyGov, I am on MyGov because I do e-tax. So I went on to this thing, and I now found that if my health provider, my doctor, does not directly get the money for me from Medicare, because some of them don't, then the money will go through and I have to check. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know what to do about that. And I'm not happy, and I don't think any of this, and I know one person who said to me the minute it went through MyGov. So, but remember, the only thing with MyGov as opposed to this thing, it doesn't actually sit on the MyGov, it goes to the tax. But again, there still means that there is one point of failure, which is a worry, which is a deep worry. And there are people who have refused to file their tax through e-tax because they don't want to do it. So people who have done e-tax for years, when it went into MyGov, they said, that's it, I'm just going to do paper. But unfortunately, it's what they have done this year, that your tax statement will go into MyGov.
Not only your tax statement.
Yeah,
but
everything.
Everything about an individual.
Yes, it is a worry. It's a deep worry. Yes, sorry.
Thank you very much for that insightful description of what's been going on the national scene, which I think most of us are oblivious about, but it's fascinating to learn about it all, and thank you very much. But my question is, you made the point that laws ought to be drafted on a generic, wide-ranging, non-technology specific basis. Now, much as I have a great respect for people in the Commonwealth Attorney General's Department and the parliamentary draftsmen in Victoria, they're bloody lawyers. And can they get their mind around this need, and are they responding appropriately?
Yeah, they are actually. So so Australia is, I don't know if it has done everything for the Budapest Convention or not, but I think it is very much a part of the Glassy and the Glassy additional extension. And yes, they have, because even if, whoever the lawyers are, we do look up to what the European Union does. So so it's lucky. So it's lucky. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you from me too for your interesting talk, and it's great as a failed pure mathematician. I'm glad there's a life after algebra.
Oh,
but
I still do algebra.
my question is, do you think the Australian government has got the balance right between fighting crime and people's privacy? And does the UN have anything to offer in ways of helping us?
The UN is so the UN is against it. I don't know, because I've not seen that part of it. I know it's against what the Council of Europe is doing. So the current one, where we are told that we have to be so scared of cyber criminals, or not really cyber criminals, terrorists, and so consequently all are they need to put a back door in, and that is very, very scary, very, very scary, because it just suddenly means that, okay, the government can get in, but so can everybody else.
We'll just make this the last question, I think.
Yeah, question on the cost of cyber security. So I do volunteer work for a charitable sort of registered charity. They applied for a grant for, I think it was about $20,000 off the top of my head. But along with the application came a 5 or 6 page document on how to implement security in their systems. And off the top of my head, I'd estimate the cost of fully implementing what they asked for, if it was done by a consultant, would cost rather a lot more than the $20,000 of the grant.
Yeah.
So could you comment on that sort of security?
Okay, so
phenomenon?
the thing with security is that there are a lot of open source tools. If you had to employ somebody to do it, yes, that would be very difficult, but it would be very, very expensive. But often what happens is there are what are called the low-hanging fruit. So you can remove those. So it is, security is getting reasonable security is not hard, not expensive. So, but you need somebody who has some knowledge, and there are, the good thing is there are interns, there are students running around trying to get that little bit of experience. So that is what you would look for. You may put your hands up and ask, university departments, and ask for students. And I know a number of our students, because they have to get experience, they go and do it. They do work in charitable organizations and try and help them. Yes, unfortunately, if you want to be on the internet, you need to be secure, because if you look at the European laws which are coming in, and I remember this is an incident which quite some years ago, I'd taken my mum to when she was visiting, I'd taken her for a scan, and you know how when we go for a scan, we have our Medicare card, and they scan the Medicare card, and she didn't have a Medicare card, of course, so I was just paying. And so the lady started entering my credit card details. And I said, why are you entering my credit card details? She said, oh, because she doesn't have a Medicare card. And I said, yeah, I know she doesn't have. Oh, so next time you come. And I said, next time I come, I'll bring my credit card. I'm not going to forget it. And I said, no, and that is, see, it is what is called data retention. There's no need for her to know my credit card details, to save it. Because if you save it, then that's a point of access. And people need to, so the next time you go and somebody tries to, store your card, say no. It's up to us. It's like when we walked through a door which we have used a card, we allow people to walk behind us, and we shouldn't. We have to be able to stand and say, no, you cannot come in here unless you have access yourself.
Very good point.
And we do.
Tell that to the major hospitals.
Yes. Yes. And that's what they say. That is social engineering. You don't go through the front door because they'll catch you. You carry a box, look very official, and you go through the door that the smokers have kept open. Yay.
Look, are you staying? Can you stay for a bit?
I will stay for a bit.
So maybe if we can, you wanted to ask Asha some questions at coffee. I found that extremely interesting, but I broke out into a lather of sweat halfway through your talk. You talked about manipulating data. 10 years ago or so, a friend of my wife's who was a widow said she'd gone onto one of these dating sites and told me how to get into her particular site, and I took a couple of wrinkles out, and she was successful and has now got a partner. Is that a crime because it all worked out for the good?
That's not a crime because you asked him.
Oh. Asha, as I said before, this is new to me, having a female presenter, and it's our policy to give a small gift to the speaker. And so I went out, and I'm going back 60 years. When I took a young girl to a ball, I bought her a bottle of Porphyry Pearl, and these gentlemen would know about that. And so I thought, well, that's what I'll go out and buy, a bottle of Porphyry Pearl. And I told my granddaughter, and she said, Grandpa, you don't give ladies Porphyry Pearl, but I'm sorry, Asha, here's a bottle of Porphyry Pearl.